Anyway, welcome to the Writer Center, a literary arts nonprofit. We support writers and people who want to write. We do this through 300 creative writing workshops each year and about 100, last year 101 events that are free and open to the public like this. We also publish Poet Lore, the oldest poetry journal in the country, showcasing the finest in contemporary poetry. And I think I'm going to leave it at that because we don't have enough time together tonight. So I want to thank Leah Mehta, from the new director of the Alan Cheuse International Writer Center from George Mason, and thank you for bringing this incredible event to us. We're here celebrating the launch of the English language version of Hana Andronikova's final novel, Heaven Has No Ground. This is my copy. You can get your own later. With me, we've got the managing editor at Plamen Press, Rachel Miranda, and the novel's translator, Roman Kostovski. I'm not going to go through their bios because they're on the website, and we have a lot to talk about. So thank you both for being here. We're going to talk about two different aspects of this very unusual special book. We're going to talk about how the book came to be, and how the book came to be in my hands, meaning how it got translated from Czech into English. So let's start, for anybody who hasn't yet had the pleasure of reading this book, let's start with format and voice. Can you describe the format and voice? And I think we can't talk about that without also touching on the themes of the book, which really inform the way it's structured.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So first of all, for those of you who have not seen it, here it is, Heaven Has No Ground, which is also in hardcover. And this artwork that makes up the cover was actually done by the author's grandfather, and we were able to get permission to use it. So that's very special. This book. So this is a work of what I think we would all agree you could call an autofiction, meaning that it's a sort of a mishmash between a work of fiction and an autobiography. And what I mean by that is that the story is about a young woman named Amma. The author's name is Hana. The young woman in the story is doing battle in unconventional ways with her diagnosis of breast cancer. We know from history that Hana chose to do battle in unconventional ways with breast cancer. She was diagnosed before she turned 40, I believe, and lost that battle when she was 44. So we do not have her here to ask questions, but we have her story in a very unusual format, which is this novel that she chose to write. It takes the form, essentially, of a series of diary entries of this young woman who gets this diagnosis and goes running off around the world looking for spiritual approaches to healing that do not include chemotherapy and radiation. She just can't buy in. And we know that Hana herself was on a spiritual journey, which did not include any particular religion, but a fascination with various forms of spiritual storytelling and healing, and that she went on this journey, both Hana and Amma, the main character of the story, to the Amazon jungle, to live for several months with a shaman, to the desert in Nevada, where she asked some Native Americans to help her with their spiritual approach to healing, and then to Israel, where she climbed Mount Masada and talked to Palestinians and talked to Israelis and tried to find some way of understanding her illness and of healing herself from the inside out. the main character of Amma in the story does all of these things. And Hana brings to us, the author, brings to us a sort of an internal experience of this journey. And then brings us back to Prague, where she submits to more conventional approaches. So we know where this story ended in real life, and I'm not going to tell you how this story ends in the book, but I can tell you that in trying to convey what this was like from inside of her, she created a kind of world of enormous energy and different points of view and different times, stream of consciousness, and lots of embedded myths from these different cultures. So it's quite a journey that she takes us all on. And I guess that's a good start for what the book is about. Themes of mortality and spirituality and reconciling ourselves with the human experience, such as it is. Roman, do you have anything to add to that?
And she does this in a very raw form, and it's basically written in a style like a travel journal. And it's basically what's so great about it is it's almost like it comes straight from her head down to the paper, and it's raw and it's genuine.
So let's take a step back, and each of you tell me how you got involved in this really a bear of a project. As we dig in, you're going to see quite how complicated this translation was. So how did you find the book, and how did the book find you, and how did you find each other?
Well, if I may, I had the great revelation of starting a press that focuses on Central Eastern and Southeastern European literature. And so I spread the word out over in Europe, and that I have this idea, and I came across an agent who had a book by a young writer, Hana Andronikova. It was called Sound of the Sundial. It's right there on the table.
The yellow cover.
The orange yellow, yes. So I read that book and I was completely blown away, and I couldn't believe that I just came out with the idea of having a press, and this wonderful masterpiece came about. And so we were working with, I was working with DC Alt, DC area translators, where I met Rachel, and I just told her about the project. And she she just got into town, and she was saying she's an editor. I said, "Would you like to work with me on this book?" And so we did, and we basically combined two translations into one. And Rachel did a remarkable job.
So, and that was the Sound of the Sundial, and from there, this was a tremendous project, and we managed to secure the rights to the other novel that Hana wrote before she died. My own relationship to this became very complicated because I became sort of obsessed with Hana's life, with what had happened to her, which in some ways paralleled my own, maybe more in wishful thinking than in reality, except for the cancer part. But she realized in midlife that she wanted to be a writer, and she became one. She left her corporate job and started writing, and then won this huge national literary award for her first novel. And so the Sound of the Sundial won this Best New Discovery Award, and then just a few years later, Heaven Has No Ground won the national award again for the People's Choice. So we know that in that time she became embedded in Czech culture, and she was beloved, so much so that even though Heaven Has No Ground is a quite difficult text, both in terms of like the reading and in terms of the themes of asking us to grapple with this young woman with, questions of death and mortality and the meaning of life. They loved it so much that they gave her this National Book Award, for a second time before she died.
I am going to jump back and forth between the substance of the book and the translations, because I have a question about translations, something that you just said about syntax. So I have learned that for people with who need hearing assistance, there's closed captioning, shows you the actual words, but ASL is much more interpretive. Is that a decent analogy for translating art?
Yes, you really have to. You really have to pay. You have to take a piece of literature, like a work of art, and transform it into another language as a work of art. So you use all types of methods, whether you're using colloquial variants or you're using your own imagination to express a certain image or something that could relate into the target language. But you cannot just, the key is you cannot have a faithful translation, because if you have a faithful translation, you're basically turning the language and, like I said, the syntax, basically the word order, it's like reading English, and someone who's bilingual can understand why it's written in this way, but you have to read it. Your ultimate goal is to translate it for the English reader, for the target reader. So you have to be creative, and that process is very creative in that sense. And it's not simultaneous translation where you ask like you see in the UN. It has to take cultural aspects from a generation. For instance, the translation of A Crime and Punishment in the '60s is different from the translation in the 90s. So that evolves in its own category. So it can be idioms where you say, for instance, in Czech, you say, "Oh, that's old news." You say, in English, you say, "That's old hat," but in Czech, you say, "That's an old vest." So, and I did a translation of Anoš Lustig's novel Fire on Water, and it had exactly that. And I used the term "that's old hat" because in English, people can understand it.
I love that. I mean, and that you have to have such a nuanced understanding of language to do that. So this is a good time to actually bring up both of your relationship with the book and with the family, because the author wasn't alive, unfortunately, to opine on how you made those decisions. But can you tell us a little bit about what that process was? Because it wasn't. It sounds like it wasn't smooth.
It wasn't, and I should say that I had gone to Prague and to Zlin, where Hana was born, and done a bunch of interviews of her family and friends and coworkers a couple of years after she died, because I became so obsessed with her story and I wanted to know more. And of course, that information overlaid this process for us, especially because this second novel was such a deeply personal account of her own experience. Not to say that she didn't inject fictional elements into it, because if you make your way through this book and go on the ride with her, you'll see that there are places, things that she describes, and the ending she chooses that couldn't possibly have happened, and that's really fun. That's a really fun part of it, right? You can't write your own death because you're writing. So it's fun to see what she decided to do. But in terms of our process, so this book, Roman was saying, this book was written kind of as a series of journal entries. Hana chose not to do any capitalizations at all throughout the book. There are none. There are periods, but there are no capitals. So you can imagine with computers how hilarious that was, because we had to go back and undo all of the automatic capitalization throughout the entire book. That was fun, but yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that in the original form that we did omit the capitalization, so we did cater to that.
Right, we honored that.
Yeah.
However, what we found was that the book was so stream of consciousness and so much in the form of, like, she literally took it out of her head and put it on the page, that we were worried that English language readers would not be able to really follow. What I mean is, for example, she switches randomly back and forth between past and present throughout the narrative. She switches randomly back and forth between first and third person throughout the narrative. And because it's a very close third person, that we're still with Amma, but sometimes it's I, and sometimes it's she. And we were concerned that this was just going to be just bewildering for English language readers. And so we admitted to ourselves later on that there was a certain level of discomfort for us, right? We just felt like it's too much chaos. We need to apply order to the chaos. And so we decided to change some of the formatting. She often didn't have paragraph breaks. We inserted them. We decided that the past tense should be in a different, should be italicized, and the present tense should not. And we decided to put things in different fonts. And this was a wonderful process, which was also peppered by our weekly conversations about what does this mean? I would read Roman's translation sort of like as he was doing it, as he was tearing his hair out.
Well, and when we're saying what does this mean, it means because in Czech it's very hard to read as well, because she has these streams of consciousness, or she's hallucinating, and you really don't understand where you're standing and where you're not. And so it's a puzzle in itself to understand it in the original language, let alone try to put it in a more concrete language. English is very concrete. You have to have a subject, you have to have a predicate, an object. It's in there. Whereas in Czech, you can. Because of declension and because of endings, everything is marked, and you can go on streams of consciousness without naming a subject for pages and pages, and still everybody will know who it's, what the sentence is or who it's talking about, and in English you have to have. You have to state it. You have to have that personal pronoun. You have to have that possibility where you have to know who you're talking about. But in Czech, you can do that with those endings. And so, trying to bring that, that flexibility which Czech has, or any Slavic language, Polish as well, but you have to do it and maintain the fluidity. So that was the part where I think I lost. I think the higher edges of my forehead.
So I do want to get to the part of your relationship with the family, but I think this would be a good time for you to read a little bit so people have an idea of what are we talking about really. So
I'd be happy to. Let me first read a passage. These are just going to be very short passages. I'm going to read two little passages that both take place when she's in the Amazon. And I would say that the lion's share of the book is there, even though, she goes all over the world, as I described. And in the Amazon, she's embedded within this sort of the sanctuary of a shaman, and this community of people who live with him and around him. And I'm gonna just read you this little passage to give a sense of the atmosphere of Hana Amma trying to absorb, what is around her, what she sees, what she's feeling. The fire is dying out. No cooking or eating will happen in the afternoon. The evening will contain another ritual. At twilight, the Shipibo emerge from the jungle, and Reina sings Amor, Amor, Medita con amor, amor, amor. It's a catchy tune that easily brings tears to Ama's eyes. Ayahuasca arrives with the darkness, the sky pinned with stars. I'm standing in front of the Mayoka, above my head a dome, as if Santini himself built it. Stars with a pink Southern Cross. Slowly I swallow it, and I take a ride on the Milky Way. I'm flying with you, and I'll crash into your dream if you don't mind. In case you don't know by now, you can jump out of your body through your head. That's why the dead turn their eyes up. Okay, so you can see where we are with her. And she took a lot of ayahuasca while she was, in the jungle. This was part of the shamanic rituals there. And these ayahuasca trips, Roman, maybe you can talk about them for a moment from a translator's perspective before I read you a tiny little passage.
Well, like I said, they were very difficult because you really wanted to understand where she was standing, or what she was doing. And I mentioned this in just previously, but this is exactly an example of where it was. The translation was very difficult. So I think just reading it would give the example.
Well, I can tell you that in my conversations with Roman, he would tell me I'm literally tearing my hair out. I was cursing her out and jumping up and down in my room. What do you think of this? And then we would read it together, and I would say, what does this word mean? Or what do you think she meant by that? It was like a slipstream that we had to step into together to be able to...
I would just add one thing that I've translated altogether 3 books that were published, a lot of that hasn't been published. I've translated surrealistic poetry like from Vítězslav Nezval. I've translated song lyrics. So where you really are constrained with song lyrics because you have to maintain the rhythm and you have to maintain the rhyme, and so that's a huge difficulty. But nothing was as difficult as translating this novel.
So here are just a couple of paragraphs, and this is dated June 3rd. There were lots of random dates that were somewhat linear, and sometimes they didn't appear, and sometimes they were in a different format or a different order. But this one says 06.03. It's building up inside of me, gathering. I'm waiting as the eyes of my killer appear above ground. They always show up when the ground is burning. I exist in layers. I create my layers quietly in the chirrup of the rainforest, and I'm quietly sweating quietly because I'm quietly sweating. Am I losing my mind? That is the question. I would like to know whether I have already lost my mind or if I'm just waiting for it to happen. And please take away these horses. They're trampling my English-style lawn. I'm on a roller coaster. At the top, I'm ecstatic that I'm alive, and at the bottom, I just want to kick the bucket. This schism is exhausting and leads nowhere. Most of the time, between breaks and hiccups, I'm fucked. So the song sounds a bit like this. Hic, pause, hic, ecstasy, chaos, death, and so on. Let's sing. I've read about people who died from the hiccups. I'm riding my doubts, wildly foaming at the mouth until it tires out all my layers to the point of total breakdown. I doubt the whole universe. What the hell are you exactly about, universe? So if you can imagine Roman in the thick of it with the ayahuasca.
Yeah, it was a challenge.
So taking just that passage, you have this incredible turn of phrase here where you're talking about sweating quietly sweating because you're sweating quietly. I mean, that's a beautiful turn of phrase in English. A word like chirrup. Those are beautiful in English. How were they in Czech? I mean, were they as lyrical? And how did you do this?
That's the point. Again, we're talking about the flexibility of the language and the morphology and the way Czech can function. It can play off words. I don't know if this is a cultural aspect or if the Czechs were, they're smack in the middle of this in Europe, right? They've been pummeled by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, by the Germans, then by the Russians throughout the years, and so they managed to create a kind of a fluid ambiguity in their in the way in their speech, and that often comes with the play of words. Let me backtrack a little bit and say, like, in my experience as a translator, I've come to a conclusion that nothing is untranslatable. That there's always a way to get that approach. If you don't use the same words, you want to get at least the same feeling. And so that's basically how I approach it. And something like this, where you're switching, switching words just in a group play, something can be easily done with a modifier that has a different word, a different ending, like in Czech, but in English it turns out to be okay.
What happened is that Roman would send me a passage or a few pages, and I would read it and be just utterly flummoxed, and then read it again, and then we would talk through the sentences one by one, and stop any place that it felt rough or it didn't feel like it was flowing smoothly. Even if it didn't necessarily make sense, it had to make its own sense. Inside of its own self, it had to make sense. It had to have integrity, and it had to sound like Hana, and she does have a sense of humor and a certain tone and a certain way about her. She's very frank. She's very direct, and she's very smart.
Yeah, and this is the important thing that translators. This is why it's so important to work with an editor, and it's important to work with an editor who doesn't speak the language that you're translating from.
Why is that?
But there are certain aspects where giving you that double perspective basically allows you to accept something that shouldn't be acceptable.
So I'm one of those people who doesn't know Czech. I don't know any of these Slavic languages that I've been working with Roman in, and I'm just lucky that he thinks that that's a good thing and not a handicap. But I was going to say, I forgot to mention, after the first little passage I read, I wondered if any of you had noticed that she switched halfway through from third person to first person. So there is something kind of seamless about it, right? Even though as translators and editors, we're looking at it and we're like, oh my God, this doesn't make any sense. But when you read it, when you experience it, you're flowing in and out of her sensibility, sometimes as she's seeing herself from a little bit of distance, and sometimes as she's experiencing things from inside her own head, which, as she keeps saying, she wants to take things out of her head and put them on the paper or for us to see them. And so that's really what she's doing. And it is a privilege, I think, to be part of this journey that she's on, which is very difficult, but we are all on it, right? I mean, even if it seems distant to us, we're all on it. We all live as human adults who are aware of our mortality. That is a very difficult philosophical challenge, spiritual challenge. And some people, as Hana observed, turn to, religion, and other people to, more diffuse forms of spirituality, or to philosophy. And she talked a lot about philosophy and string theory in this book. And it's because she was just trying to grapple, as humans grapple in all the different ways that we do, with this idea of mortality that we all have to face. There's no getting away from it. So I do think, we're making it sound like this incredibly slogging process, but the truth is, there's great pleasure in it, in going along with her on her ride. And I think it's a work of mastery that she was able to achieve this really when she was dying. That she was able to write this and let us see what she was experiencing and thinking and going through. It's a work of bravery, to do something like that. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's not all, it's not a slog. It's
no.
It's a journey.
No, and it's just because I stayed, it was challenging. It was very gratifying as well. I love doing this. Lord knows that we don't make a lot of money off of doing literary translation, but it is a creative process, and I find that when I'm in a creative process, that's when I'm the happiest.
Hana, too, was trying to convey, the creative process through her own creative process. It's very meta in a lot of ways, reading this book. You're really sort of seeing the writer trying to reflect on what it's like to be a writer as she's dying, trying to reflect on what it's like to die. So, it's very exciting. She was, I learned in my interviews and my travels, incredibly stubborn. She would engage in debate with anyone over anything. She was so smart. And in some ways, learning that about her, made me see this story in a different way, because an incredibly stubborn person would say, oh, I'm sorry, everyone else is going for chemo and radiation, but I'm going to go live with in the Amazon jungle with the shamans. And she never apologizes for this decision. It's not ever in the story, and not ever in life. She might have regretted it. I'm sure she regretted it at times, And she came back. She came back and wrote about coming back and submitting herself to those conventional, forms of medicine. But it's so thought-provoking to go through that journey.
And she does it with a tremendous amount of wit and humor and sarcasm and whimsical language, and that's what was, that's what makes her such a remarkable writer.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot of fun.
So let's go all the way back to the question I asked in the beginning that I said I was going to go back to about working. But now that I know more about this process, I want to know, when you were working with the family, I want to know if they spoke English. I want to know, how did you present, because they did push back against some of the changes. So was that, but I want to ask you about the technical part and whether that was a struggle. Then I want to know if you, Rachel, think that there was an emotional component because this is about mortality as well. So.
Well, basically, the issue is that they did not agree with the formatting. They did not like the fact that when there was a different point of view, we had a different style of font. And so, but what they pinpointed, what they pinpointed was the fact that this was not happening just in English, but it was also happening in Czech. Basically, Hana submitted her manuscript to several publishing houses in the Czech Republic, but they wanted to change it. They wanted to make probably the same changes that we were suggesting, and she categorically refused, and then ended up going with a publisher that accepted her style of formatting. And we had a long discussion about what we're supposed to do, what we should do, because we put a lot of hours into this, and we were happy with it. But at the end, we came to a conclusion that this is a travel journal, that basically Hana was expressing herself in a very raw form. And basically the format indicates that raw form, that from the mind straight to the paper. And at the end, we agreed to change the format back to its original form. And to be honest, I think that was a better choice.
So I thought about this a lot too, and I was very frustrated at the time with the pushback from the family and, all the effort we had made to try to make it more, comprehensible. And then I realized that some of my discomfort, some of our discomfort, came down to, struggling with the chaos that Hana was struggling with. And she was asking us as readers to struggle with that chaos. She categorically refused to let people make order out of it, even in her native language. And so who were we then to impose that order? We were actually losing the spirit of the story that she had written, and I think that the spirit is king. The spirit is more important than the exact meaning, because in the end, language is conceptual. We're using words to try and convey concepts. Sometimes they're simple and sometimes they're complex, but the spirit is what comes out. And that's, Roman, was talking about this quite a lot before, about how you have to sort of juggle the need for exactitude against the need for forming the right concepts in the, target language. So this was part of that process. In the end, we changed it all back. It was very painful, and we did it, and kicking and screaming. And I thought, yeah, we're kicking and screaming. That's exactly what Hana was doing and what she was asking us to do. And so we both sort of ended up feeling at peace with that decision, even though at the time it was quite challenging to let go and to go back through the manuscript and take it all out. It was so hard.
Couldn't just clear formatting?
No.
Not quite.
No, and it just shows that the process is always this type of work is, you're always learning. You're always changing your strategies, your philosophies on how your approaches on how to take, and it is basically every book is different, and that's the it's not it's not a straightforward cookie cutter process, and it brings like any art, it brings a lot of emotion, but you put your you also put your soul into transforming it so that others can read it in another language.
And there's no doubt, there's a plot, you can follow the plot. There's a story, it exists, it's in there, you won't miss it, it'll be there. We made sure of that. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's a dance.
Definitely.
It's worth dancing.
I think we're going to turn to questions, if there are any questions. Got Leo with the mic.
It's on.
Having read the book, she, in addition to sort of the stream of consciousness and travel diary, she has this correspondence, this email correspondence with, I guess, a good friend of hers, maybe who's back in Prague. I'm not really sure. But what do you think, or why she kind of uses that, or does she use that to explain different things than she does with some of the other sort of more journal type, so what, I guess how does she use that email sort of correspondence throughout the book, and if it's different?
I just want to say that, this book was written in the 2000s, and this was a time when, email is starting to come into literature as a form of communication. People were experimenting with it, Skype, the new, and I think that she wanted to, she in her, in the book says that, thanks to the internet, she's, her circle of friends is, global in the surrounding. And so she wants to communicate with people, and she does communicate with people all over the world. And it seems like it's in one room. And I think that was part of, she was a very experimental writer. She wrote in ways that was defining the norm at the time, and even today. She was always trying to hit new boundaries, and definitely Heaven Has No Ground portrays that in her style of writing.
Also, just answering more directly as someone who also writes fiction, I think that, introducing a character who is a physicist who she can correspond with allows her to bring in very sort of organically some other questions, than the ones she's asking in the middle of an ayahuasca trip, or, when she's on top of Mount Masada. And so I think it was also a literary device that she used to talk about chaos theory and string theory and other aspects of the universe and the human experience that she wants to convey that there isn't a place for in the narrative, let's say.
Hi there. I haven't read the book yet, but I'm Caroline Bach. I'm planning to do the article for the Washington Independent Review on your press. And I am wondering, as I'm listening to these wonderful descriptions, that you're translating from a country that has a deep literary tradition, Milan Kundera, Havel, Kafka, but is still, I can't name a female Czech writer, and I can't name a recent Czech writer. So how do you sort of, how do American readers discover this?
Well, that's because they haven't been translated.
Okay. And
there's
and why then haven't they been translated? Because
there's only a few translators, that are working on, particularly Czech, but there's been a series of new books that came out by female, for instance, Hulova. There's a translator, Alex Zucker, who's translated several female writers. There's a new generation of female writers in the Czech Republic that are out there writing, and they're more followed in the UK right now. But within time, hopefully, and with our work, with Plamen Press, we're hoping to expose this. This is what our mission is.
Is there any way you would describe sort of the moment right now in Czech literature that, we could say, the post-Soviet era sort of brought us Milan Kundera and others. Is there a moment now that you would describe?
Well, Sound of the Sundial was declared by Radio Prague as one of the most important novels written after the Velvet Revolution.
Right. I think Hana really opened the door. And this is, when I interviewed, there was a professor at Charles University in Prague who I spoke with quite at length because he happened to have been an old professor of Hana's, but also on the committee that awarded the prize to her the first time when it was submitted anonymously and nobody knew who she was, and everyone thought it was a lost Milan Kundera manuscript. Hana paved the way. My understanding is that until she came along, that there was a period of sort of desert after Kundera when there was not a lot happening of great literary value in the Czech Republic, and then from Hana on, things have grown. Am I?
No.
Do I have that wrong?
I would disagree with that. It's
you
just,
are the
again,
expert.
Again,
sure.
This is the thing about this is that it's what's available in English. Okay, we're looking
Or in
at
America.
In America, yeah. No, there's the literary tradition in the Czech Republic, in the Slavic in Eastern Europe, everywhere is vibrant. It's just a matter about what goes beyond. Who will go and translate those novels? Who will bring it to the English speakers, and or to the global community? The translate. This is not just this is not just English. It's German. It's French.
And even
I am not going to defend the American reader.
I was going to say, it's a tough market here.
And yet, the U.S. is one of the highest markets of selling books. So, but the issue is, translated literature has been a minuscule market, right? 3% of publications in the U.S. are literature translated from another language. 3%. In the Czech Republic and in Slovakia, it's 37%. That's the difference. But the situation is changing because we do have better technology, easier technology. We don't have to create books and store them in a warehouse and hope that they get sold. We've got print on demand, and that's how we as a press came about. The first time I came up with the idea of doing the press was I was in Politics and Prose, and I saw that big machine, the Opus, where I saw that people were actually ordering books to sell, to print right then and there, and I was like, that is a good, that can be a concept that we could follow through and do it on a minor budget, and try to push that type of literature out in the English-speaking world.
But there is no doubt that it's a slow process, and especially in America. Even books that are read in England might never jump the pond and come over here because American readers are still pretty myopic, and that's part of what that's part of the mission, is to blow open the vision and get people interested in other in literature with different feeling than what they're used to.
And that's why we're so grateful to work with like the Cheuse Center and with the Writer Center, because they're really organizations that are supportive of what we're doing. And it gives us a good opportunity and a good foundation to do this. In DC, where we have all the embassies, we have all the cultural centers. We could be making DC the center for literature and translation in this country, because it is in every country's best interest to promote their culture. So, and we're doing that. We're working with the Czech embassy. We've worked with the Macedonian embassy. Hoping to do a few things with the Latvian embassy. So, yeah, I think we're going off a tangent onto the onto Plamen Press now.
But I just want to say, here, let's do it. Let's make DC the center of translated literature in America. Wouldn't that be awesome?
I mean, and I think that Roman himself, speaking 10 languages, you can be the fulcrum yourself personally.
Yeah.
So we do have to wrap up. I'm going to throw in a very, very, very short question because I'm really curious, and then people can stick around for a little while and ask other questions. Have a glass of wine and some. I hear the watermelon's good. How long did this take?
The book?
The translation?
The translation?
Yeah.
Well, with 3 kids, 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, we did start working on it a very, very long time ago.
Because you've got to do it at midnight or at 6 in the morning, or right before work starts. Because you're not getting paid to do it.
And I would say hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of discussion and
discussion
back
yes,
and forth.
But we did
Talmudic level.
Well, when I say we're not getting paid, we did get an NEA grant for this, and we're waiting for a grant for the promotion of this book from the Ministry of Culture from the Czech Republic. So it's not true we didn't get paid.
We got paid a little.
Can I say something?
Yes,
Yeah.
you may.
I think it's the right way. Hi. So I just wanted to say that we did Martin Volpenka's book at the Czech embassy, which is another translation, and you were asking about, and he's Czech as well. He's one of the most famous Czech writers, and one of the things that I wanted to just say was that in the last couple of years of the writing and reading that I do, the things that have stood out to me have been Martin's book, also Czech, and this book as well, but also the Ukrainian poets and the kind of writing that comes out of Ukraine as well, even before 2014, but after 2014 in particular. So some of the best writing I've read is actually coming out of, I feel like, out of Eastern Europe right now. And then some of it isn't contemporary to, I mean, it is a contemporary, but it's post Kundera and post, it's like in the last 20 years or so, the most incredible writing. So
We have one of those books of Ukrainian poetry too.
Yes.
Plamen
Yeah.
Press does.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did.
It's wonderful.
We,
Paper Bridge.
So Paper Bridge is an amazing book, and we did an event with Vasil Makhno as well. So in general, like I feel like it's this whole world of incredible writing that if you just you encounter it, and this book in particular that you all have here reminds me a lot of what was considered to be one of the great feminist novels from South Africa, one of the first novels, which is called Story of an African Farm, which has a similar kind of stream of consciousness, feeling, and a metaphysical feeling. And so, I think if one can sort of sit down and savor some of this literature, it's a real, these books are gems, so Yeah.
And there's
Thank
so
you.
much more out there, and
Yeah.
we're touching not even the tip of the iceberg. And we could be like my expertise is for Slavic languages and for Eastern, Central, and Southeastern Europe. The Balkans has incredible writers as well. Their experience from the Bosnian War, all of that has not. There's only a few have been translated. So our goal is to be a platform for that type of literature to expand globally, thanks to English, because English is a global language.
We're gonna have to stop it there. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry this was so many hours and hours of your work, but I am delighted, and I really want to thank you in particular, Leah, and the Cheuse Center for bringing this to us. I'm not sure I would have discovered this on my own, and I'm so glad that I did, and I'm glad to talk about it here. And I have to turn off the microphone now.
Okay.
Thank
well,
you all.
Thank you all for
Amy,
coming.
for moderating. She has wonderful questions.
I've got a lot more.